One journalist formerly based in Mexico discusses how that experience is shaping her approach to find and show solutions and not just report bad news. Plus, we discuss Stockton's impact in the real estate market in Atlantic City. It's all here on the next Latino Motion. Join us.
Choose to get lost in the woods to gain experience in forest management.
Choose to travel through time to understand the past.
Choose to soar to pursue a career in dance.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation, and Stockton University. This edition of Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is brought to you by the HD Studios at the campus of Stockton University. Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, a member of Geisinger, Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world, and South Jersey Gas. Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Motion. One journalist with an abundance of international experience is here locally in South Jersey trying to solve problems or show solutions rather than just cover bad news. Joining me is the aforementioned journalist, Eleanor Comley. Eleanor, welcome to Latino Motion.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about that interesting international experience you have.
Right, so as you know, and as the viewers are probably going to pick up on, I'm not originally from South Jersey. So I got my start as a journalist more than 15 years ago in the UK. I worked in London. I covered business and financial news, and with the magazine that I worked for, I transferred over to New York. While I was in New York, I covered the global financial crisis, and I joined Reuters. While I was working for Reuters, I transferred to Mexico City.
And you were in Mexico for over 5 years.
Exactly. I was in Mexico for 5 years. I did a whole load of different reporting jobs. I wrote about earthquakes and hurricanes and also business news.
Let's talk about your experience in Mexico. Obviously, as a foreigner there covering the news, might have been a little bit challenging, and you did pick up some Spanish along the way.
I did. I actually studied languages at university because I really wanted to be a journalist who worked abroad. It was my dream to work in Mexico, and I loved it. But one of the challenges with being a foreign correspondent is that you are witness to events that you are covering for an audience that is international and lives abroad. So that means that you cover the event in a very different way to the way that you would if you were living there, as I was at the time.
So how so? How is it different?
I think that means that's what leads to the headlines that you see out of Mexico, which you get the impression that every day in Mexico there is a drug war massacre. It's an incredibly dangerous place to visit for tourists. And that's not really the case, but those are the headlines that make or qualify as news for the international audience. As a resident of Mexico for 5 years, I had 2 kids while I was living there. I would send them very happily to Mexican guarderia, to the daycare. We would eat tacos for cena. We were very integrated into our community in Mexico City. And obviously I realized that the headlines of drug war violence were not the reality.
You said you had your children there, and you got to learn a lot more about the language. Tell me a little bit about what your favorite parts of Mexico were.
My absolute favorite parts were the food and the people.
Yeah.
I miss it every single day. I mean, there wasn't a single day where I didn't have something different to eat. And there was fresh juice everywhere. There was so many different types of fruits and vegetables that I'd never tried before. I think that's probably one of the stories of Mexico that's just not told often enough outside of the country, just what an abundance of produce there really is.
And obviously, your husband was also there in Mexico, also picked up on the language, and is also a reporter.
Exactly. He's a writer too.
Well, we want to talk a little bit more about that experience and particularly that perspective that you mentioned. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with former Mexican-based journalist Eleanor Comley. And Eleanor, we were talking about the difference in coverage in Mexico. You alluded to on the international scene, how you're always looking for the sensational headlines. Let's talk more about the difference and how you approach the coverage there in Mexico.
Right. So when you're a foreign correspondent, which was my dream since I went to university, I studied Spanish precisely so that I could get to work in a foreign country and be a reporter. But the problem with being a foreign correspondent is that you are presenting the international view to an international audience. So that, I think, is what means that the international audience reads these headlines that are sensational.
So what's the driver there? Is that the editor, the audience? What drives that?
So I think what happens is that whether you're a TV viewer or a newspaper reader, the editor of the program or the editor of the newspaper are making decisions for the reader or the viewer based on what they think the reader or the viewer want to see or read. And usually that has something to do with ratings when it comes to TV. It has something to do with newspaper sales or ad clicks. And that is what drives this kind of feedback loop where the news that is in the newspaper or is on the TV is the news that people think the audience wants to read about.
What would you have rather covered?
Well, I mean, I felt a big struggle because as a resident of Mexico with 2 Mexican-born children and a husband living with me, we had lots of friends, we had a great time, a great life. There were so many things about Mexico that I wanted to write about and tell people about. But my editors would say, well, nobody is interested in that, or we don't think that that is an appropriate story for our audience. And that becomes very frustrating. It makes you feel like you're not presenting a very complete picture of what life is like.
Let's talk a little bit about how you approach reporting there and access to information.
So one of the big projects that I worked on while I was there was an investigative piece. I was looking at the state oil company, which is called Pemex. And I was able to do some groundbreaking work using new freedom of information laws in Mexico. One of the things that probably very few people know is that actually the transparency laws in Mexico are much better than they are in the US and many other developed countries. There are a lot of surprising things about Mexico that you learn.
That transparency is something we wish we had nowadays.
Absolutely.
How about the safety of you as a journalist?
So I never felt threatened or in danger at any point while I was in Mexico. And even when I was doing my job and when I was working outside of Mexico City, one of the things that I know is that it's a tremendously dangerous place to be as a journalist. I think more journalists were killed in Mexico last year than in anywhere else in the world. But what I also knew from having that job in that country for 5 years was that the people who were in danger were the local Mexican-born reporters. I don't think that there were any international reporters who were ever injured or killed. And what would happen is that the local reporters would be they would be targets for blackmail by the cartels.
Yeah, very unfortunate situation, but we want to talk about your Atlantic City connection. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion, and once again with journalist Eleanor Comley, formerly based in Mexico, and now with Route 40 South Jersey News and Information. Let's talk about your Atlantic City connection before we talked about the business you're now in.
Right, so I'm English. I lived in New York and then Mexico, and now I'm in Atlantic City. And the reason I'm in Atlantic City is because my husband was born and raised here. So when we had our two small kids in Mexico, we basically realized that with both of us working and being a long way away from both sets of family, it would be so much nicer to be closer to at least one set of our family. So we thought we would see what we could do as journalists here in South Jersey.
Well, welcome to South Jersey. I'm glad you have that Mexico experience, because you are taking a little bit of a different approach to journalism in terms of solving solutions and showing some positive information instead of just bad news. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about that.
Right, so both of us pay our bills by freelancing for other magazines mostly. But what we really wanted to do was set up our own online news service. And as the co-editors and co-founders, we really get to define the way that we go about writing news. And so we got to kind of deal with some of the frustrations that we had working for other editors and take some of the things that we've learned elsewhere and really try to focus on telling not just the good news stories, but we want to tackle all of the news that happens, but with a kind of solutions-driven spin. So we try to write news that hasn't been covered elsewhere. So we want to dig deep into communities that aren't really on the radar of a lot of the
Latino community would be one of them.
Exactly.
So we appreciate that you're covering the Latino community as well.
Absolutely. So that's what we're trying to do, really, shine light on.
So it's called Route 40 South Jersey News and Information. And it's an online-based platform. Uh-huh. And obviously, you kicked this off, and it's ongoing right now. Yep,
we've been running for about 2 years at this point.
So what's next for you?
Well, really, we know that it takes a very long time to build a platform and a brand, so that's what we're doing now. We're active across social media, across Twitter and Instagram, and that's what we're really trying to do. We hope to be very collaborative. We've already worked on some statewide projects that have been kind of organized by Montclair State University. We collaborate with other online independent news providers around South Jersey. And really our main interest is just to cover stories that have not been in the spotlight and deserve more attention, and work with communities to try and find solutions to problems.
And we're hoping that you also collaborate with Latino Motion, because we like to bring some of those stories to light. Obviously, you're out there in covering some of those local community happenings, and certainly something that we could share here on Latino Motion as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here, and welcome to South Jersey.
Thank you.
Please stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. The new Atlantic City campus of Stockton is expected to impact the local real estate market. Joining me is Sheila Torres to discuss this some more. Sheila, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, obviously, big announcement. Stockton has opening its doors in September in Atlantic City. It is expected to have an impact. Tell me more about that.
Correct. Yes. Now with Stockton and even South Jersey Gas opening this fall, that is impacting the market, the real estate market in Atlantic City.
In a positive way.
In a positive way.
Yeah, so tell me some of the what you foresee as impacts.
Impacts in housing. Apparently, already almost 100% of the dorm rooms that are oceanfront for Stockton, they're already at capacity. So now those other students might start looking outside of campus for housing.
So what we're saying is the common supply and demand, right? So
Correct.
there's a lot more demand for housing than there are available units. Also want to mention that the opening of Stockton is not the only positive thing happening. There's also new casinos that have opened up with more employees. That's also impactful.
Yes, and it's been a very positive impact because now the economy is going up. It was about 30,000 new employments in Atlantic City in the past couple months. So now with that being said, people feel more comfortable with job security in order to start purchasing homes again.
So if you're looking to sell right now, what should you be mindful of?
Right now, if you're looking to sell, now is the time. A lot of people tends to hold on to the properties to the spring. It's always the right time. It's always the right time to sell because I always say the buyer that goes out there in the middle of the winter, for example, is because they're serious buyers. So a lot of people tends to hold their properties to the spring. And it's always a good time, and especially now with the job stability, people is out there looking for houses. And the market, the prices, they're still good and they're still stable. So that motivates the buyer to continue their home purchase.
Let's talk about the to purchase, all right? This may put some home ownership out of reach for some people, right, within that Chelsea area of Atlantic City. What advice do you give to folks who are looking to purchase near Atlantic City?
Now is the time. Now is the time before the prices continue to increase. The prices, they're good. They're not too high. They're not as low as they were, but the price is starting to increase in the same way it's happening nationwide. We're still at the bottom of the list compared to other big cities in the country, so it's still affordable for them to buy at this point.
What are you seeing as far as a retail space in Atlantic City?
Retail space around Stockton, if you look now, because obviously Stockton is growing very fast. So Stockton, as they grow, they will continue to expand to all those commercial spaces around the university.
So now's the time, whether you're buying, whether you're selling, obviously, or expanding the business or looking for opportunities because of the new attractions coming to Atlantic City, now's the time.
Yes, now is the time.
That's a good message. Well, we're going to talk about buy versus rent. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. Homeownership is still a dream for many. Joining me, Sheila Torres, once again to discuss steps towards achieving that dream. Sheila, we just talked about the Stockton impact in the real estate market. We do expect prices to go up. Is there still opportunity for first-time home owners or home buyers to get into the market?
Yes, definitely. There's still some grants out there, the state grants still available for $10,000 to assist first-time home buyers.
What are some of the other things that first-time homeowners should consider?
They should consider keep their debts as low as possible because they can have excellent credit, but if they have a higher debt to ratio, that's gonna put a big obstacle when it comes the time to get pre-approved.
And that means keeping your credit card balances pretty low.
Low, but not at zero, because when you have them at zero, that also affects your credit.
So obviously you have to have money for down payment, and there aren't many programs where you could just go with no down payment. What should you consider in terms of what amount you should save? If
you have decent credit to get as a first-time home buyer, meaning like 620, between the 620 640s, you can go FHA with as low as 3.5% down. Okay. If you have better credit, then you can go conventional, and your first-time home buyer, you can go as low as 3% down. So let's talk about if you're actually renting right now, what strategy should you use, and why is it important to consider purchasing instead of continue to rent? Because right now, rents are about 26.3% higher than what a mortgage will be. It's a lot cheaper to purchase versus renting.
Some people kind of get into that rut where they're just stuck renting. So what do you suggest? How do you go about forming a plan to improve your credit and to save towards a down payment?
Saving, obviously, but always make sure it's in the bank. Don't money under the mattress, like we will say. It doesn't work. And just be organized with their debts, I will say. Because like I just mentioned, the less debts that you have, it will put you in a better position to be pre-approved for a mortgage.
Now, obviously, you're working within the Latino community. You just opened up a new place in Atlantic City. Those folks who may be on the border, not sure, do you give them free advice in terms of what steps they should take towards homeownership?
Definitely. We are located about a block away from the new university. So, and there's a huge community for Spanish people. And I'm always there Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So they're welcome to come and we can talk and I can guide them how to achieve their next purchase.
What's the biggest obstacle most people face?
Debts.
That's credit.
Debts. People tend to max out the credit cards. That's what I see the most.
So it's always a good idea to cut down on those credit cards. And
Yes,
obviously,
because they have good credit, because they made their payments on time
Right.
and everything. But having those high debts, that takes away from the amount that they can get pre-approved to purchase a home.
now there's other things that are happening. The good bargains aren't there no more. So
No.
if you're looking for foreclosure, for example, that they're not as readily available as before.
We are at that 10-year mark already. So the new foreclosure filings, they're about 29% down now.
Yeah, lower from last year.
Yes, from last year.
And at the same time, the real estate market is going up, particularly in Atlantic County. So
Yes.
that means less deals available if you're looking to purchase, but
Correct.
it's still achievable.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing this information
You're
with
welcome.
our audience, and thank you for joining us at home once again here on Latino Motion.
Choose to get your feet wet, to learn more about protecting our environment.
Choose to read minds, to understand the human brain.
Choose to get your hands dirty, to create a masterpiece.
Stockton University offers 50 high-quality academic programs, small class sizes, and affordable tuition. Choose to match your interests and talents at one of New Jersey's nationally ranked universities.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare, a member of Geisinger. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.